I never imagined a single act of courage could disrupt a billionaire's reign of fear. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. My breath caught in my throat as I stumbled into the heart of darkness. The air was thick with panic, whispers echoing like shadows on the walls, conspiracies swirling like the choking smoke of a burning secret. The towering skyscrapers loomed overhead, each window a mocking eye, watching as I waded deeper into uncertainty that I had always been just a face in the crowd, an unremarkable office clerk in a world ruled by wealth and deception. But that day, beneath the weight of looming dread, I felt a flicker of something alive and fierce burning within me. My heart raced, my skin prickled. I wasn't alone in this terrifying labyrinth, I had joined a growing tide of resistance. We were a collective of broken dreams and embers of hope, ready to challenge an empire built on blood, money and fear, but who would believe us? Who would stand alongside a nobody like me? The billionaire, Harris Vale, glided through parties like he was royalty, his charm a weapon, his influence a snare. He thrived in shadows, relishing the misery of those crushed beneath his heels. Everyone whispered his name in fear, and yet, here I was, trembling but determined, desperate to unveil the monster behind the mask that we met at dusk, a group of youths sparkling with defiance, faces painted with resolve. The concrete felt cold beneath my bare hands, the chill sending shivers up my arms as I listened to the tales of his victims. Each word fell heavy with truth, like stones upon my conscience. I could feel the lump in my throat as they recounted heartbreak, a job lost, a friend betrayed. A pregnant silence fell, despair wrapping around us like a thick fog. How many had suffered at his hands? Then, like a flash, a plan ignited in the dark. A rumor spread, skimming over rooftops and diving into hearts. An unexpected opportunity lay before USA Gala, a chance to shine light on his dark legacy. Nervous laughter bubbled beneath the surface, masked by biting fear that I could feel their eyes on me. "You were the one who spoke out first," one girl whispered, her voice quaking. The trembling honesty in her tone made my stomach twist. Was it me they looked to? I couldn't shake the illusion that one wrong move could shatter everything. They needed me. I could hear my heartbeat thudding loudly in my ears. Courage was a fragile thing, and I was holding on by mere threads. The night of the gala, my hands shook with the weight of what was to come. The place was exquisite, glimmering chandeliers dripping gold. Laughter mingled with the clinking of glasses, a facade of elegance masking the poison lurking beneath. My heart hammered in my chest as I walked through the crowd, every eye darting between me and the image of the monstrous billionaire on his pedestal, and then I saw him. Harris Vale, dressed to the nines, confidence radiating from him like a sinister aura. He laughed, and the sound sliced through me, a cold blade of arrogance. I felt small, tiny against his towering presence, like a moth drawn to the flame. What was I thinking? Who was I to dismantle a giant? But as I made my way toward him, an unexpected calm washed over me. The pain of my past, the anguish of my pierced surged through me, a tidal wave of emotion. It was now or never. I took a breath, and the world around me faded into a blur. I opened my mouth, words barely a whisper at first, but they gained strength with every syllable. "You're not invincible," but before I could finish, chaos erupted. A scream pierced the air, sharp and terrifying. People turned, confusion and then terror washing over their faces. Harris' expression morphed from smug to shock, the kind you see when secrets threaten to expose themselves in daylight, and then everything came crashing down. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The world around me blurred further as adrenaline surged through my veins. The scream had echoed like a gunshot, piercing the glamour of the gala and pulling the shroud of civility off the gathering. Just as Harris's gaze snapped toward the sound, I saw a woman in white, wide-eyed and shaking, clutching her throat. It was an unthinkable act, a visceral display of terror unleashed upon this seemingly perfect night. "Get out!" someone shouted, panic spreading like fire among guests. The polished marble beneath my feet felt almost foreign as everyone surged toward the exits, writhing, desperate to escape the chaos that was now permeating the air. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, but I stood there, feeling rooted to the spot as my eyes remained locked on Harris Vale. His expression shifted again, and for the briefest moment, I sensed fear raw and palpable not just of the crowd but of something deeper within himself. This was a man who had always masked his vulnerability behind a facade of power. And now, here he was, in the midst of a storm he could not control. Before I could fathom my next step, the woman in white collapsed onto the polished floor, her hand pressed against her chest, gasping for breath. A hush fell over the room, and I instinctively edged closer, concern mingling with the uncertainty thrumming within me. "Someone help her!" a voice shouted, cutting through my dazed thoughts. I stepped into the gap that divided me from the chaos, my instincts kicking in, recalling the first aid classes I had begrudged attending back in my office. There was no time to hesitate. I knelt beside her, moving gently but efficiently, checking her vitals, attempting to offer a calming presence amid the swirling uncertainties. As I worked, something extraordinary happened. Hushed whispers of encouragement emanated from those who remained. Strangers emerged from the shadows, offering their help, their compassion. An older man handled a pulse check, while a woman pressed a silk handkerchief against the woman's lips. It wasn't the power I expected from the elite, it was raw humanity, unshackled from the gilded chains that typically bound us, but all the while, I sensed Harris moving closer, his towering figure casting a shadow over our makeshift scene. The tension in the air shifted, his sharp gaze met mine, a twisted labyrinth of confusion, anger, and vulnerability that I dared not interpret. There he stood, incapable of addressing the crisis just a few feet away, a man stripped bare of the machinations that usually defined him. "Why don't you act?" I blurted out. The words slipped from my lips before I could rein them back. "This is your gala. Your responsibility." The room hung on my words, a mixture of surprise and admiration flooding my veins as I waited for his response. That he froze for a moment, and then a dark smile pulled at the corners of his lips. "And what would you know of responsibility?" he replied, voice smooth yet laced with an edge. "Your peace comes from your ignorance." "But my peace comes at the cost of lives," I shot back, a newfound courage rising within me. The woman on the floor coughed harshly, dragging my attention back. Harris's smile faded, and the shift within him was tangible. This wasn't just about the event anymore, it was about lives intertwined in this twisted web he had spun. As the first responders began to arrive, I locked eyes with a fellow companion from the resistance. It was Laura, the girl who had whispered to me at the first meeting. She looked shaken but determined, and I felt an unspoken bond between us, an alliance forged amid chaos. Together, we had stepped into the lion's den, and yet our resolve seemed to echo louder than the fear that had threatened to consume us. But just as flickers of hope ignited around us, an alarm blared, cutting through the air like a knife. Panic surged again as attendees pushed their way to the exits, confusion driving them into a frenzy. It was then that I noticed Hema figure in dark clothing, slipping away from the gathering, eyes locking onto mine for a mere instant. Something deep inside me stirred, an unsettling feeling that it was a thread I needed to pull. Who was that? I turned back to Laura, my heart pounding, desperation clouding my judgment. "What do we do now?" But as she opened her mouth to speak, a terrible understanding dawned on me. His chaos wasn't just about Harris Vale and his reign of terror, something much darker lurked in the shadows, threatening to ensnare us all. The loading doors burst open behind us, revealing glimmers of light that cut through the dusk, but with it came a new fear. If we were stepping into freedom, what horrors awaited us just beyond this fleeting moment? As the echoes of confusion began to subside and the night pressed closer, I sensed the looming presence of danger and deception lying in wait. Our fight was not yet over, and as I hesitated, stealing a moment to gather my thoughts, I knew one thing: the labyrinth had just begun to unfold, and I could feel the trembling echoes of courage whispering within me, urging me to carve out the truth from the darkness that loomed ahead. The world outside, infused with blinding lights and muffled shouts, stood in stark contrast to the insidious trepidation that clung to the walls of the gallows hall. I took a deep breath, inhaling the acrid scent of fear mixed with a hint of perfume, the atmosphere thickening like a storm cloud brewing far away. Beside me, Laura slipped her hand into mine, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone in this maelstrom. Do you think it was him? She whispered, the tremor in her voice betraying the brave facade she tried to uphold. I didn't answer right away. My eyes had strayed back to the figure in the dark clothing, now just a fleeting memory, but the weight of his gaze lingered within me, a puzzle waiting to be pieced together. As the sirens of the first responders filled the air, I felt an urgency to act, not just as a reflex to the chaos but as a battle cry against Harris Vale's dominion, a rebellion ignited by the faintest spark of hope. Stay here, I whispered to Laura before breaking away, weaving through the panicking crowd toward the nearest exit. The tension clung to me like a second skin, each step echoing the heartbeat in my ears. I had to know who that figure was. The air outside was cool, a stark contrast to the heat of the chaos that thrummed through the hall. Yet freedom felt elusive, like a mirage in a desert of despair. People poured from the entrance, some stumbling, eyes wide with horror as they reoriented themselves outside the gilded cage of the gala. I pressed forward, scanning the darkened street for any sign of the mysterious figure. Wait! A voice called from behind. I turned just as Laura caught up with me, determination etched across her face. I'm coming with you. We need to figure this out together. We stepped away from the thrumming mass of frightened attendees, trying to take stock of the situation. He looked familiar, I murmured, the memory almost haunting in its clarity. Like someone I've seen before in the networks we've monitored. The networks. Laura's brow knitted as she pulled out her phone. If it's the man I think it is, he's not just a ghost. He's connected to Harris in ways we can't even start to fathom. He's involved in the dealings we've been trying to expose. Something clicked in my mind, a buried thought propelled to the surface. What if he's our key? What if he gets us closer to the truth we need? Laura's hesitation exposed the ever-ticking clock behind my decision-making. But he's dangerous. We don't know his intentions. Before I could reply, the ground shifted beneath us. A surge of voices spiraled back toward the gala, mixing with the sound of sirens. The first responders were beginning to mobilize, and the gravity of the moment pressed like a weight against my chest. An impulse surged through me. His was my moment, and I couldn't let it slip away. Let's go back in, I said, the words spilling out before doubt could creep in. We have to follow him, but what if he's one of Harris's men? I met Laura's eyes, the flicker of resolve sparking within. Exactly. What if? And what if we find the information that can unravel everything? As we turned back toward the gala's entrance, an electrifying energy coursed through me. I had been a shadow in Harris's world for too long, afraid to step into the light of truth. But tonight, the echoes of courage whispered louder than ever, urging me forward into the unknown. Just as we stepped through the entrance, I felt an arm tug at my sleeve. It was the woman in white, the one who had collapsed. She was upright now, eyes wide and clouded with terror, her voice a breathy whisper. You need to get out of here. He's coming for you. My heart dropped, a cold chill sweeping through me. Who? I asked, but she only shook her head, her words spilling out in frantic breaths. You're in danger. The man you saw, he's not just a ghost. He's a predator. Harris, he knows you're onto him. Before I could process her warning, I heard an ominous calm settling over the room, interrupted by the low hum of anticipation. The guests were beginning to realize, like a heavy fog rolling in, that this night had not yet reached its climax. It was only just beginning, and then I felt a rush of warmth spreading through the crowd as Harris Vale appeared, more imposing than ever, eyes scanning the room as if searching for something, or someone. My breath caught in my throat. There was no mistaking the determination etched onto his face, a deep-seated resolve that spelled out danger. "Laura, we need to move," I urged, fear coursing through my veins. But as I turned, I felt the woman gripping my arm tighter, her pulse racing beneath her trembling fingers. There was an urgency in her gaze that signaled a revelation even more profound than I anticipated. "Find the truth," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before it finds you." In that moment, everything crystallized, a sense of purpose ignited within me as my gaze returned to Harris. The predator was hunting, we were all part of a larger game. The realization washed over me, and with it came breathing pulses of courage. I gripped Laura's hand tightly, determination burning like a beacon in the shadows, and began to weave through the throng of swirling bodies. The clock was ticking down to something far beyond my understanding. One truth, one moment, was all it would take to ignite the final battle against fear. The stakes were higher than ever, and I felt the pull toward a revelation that could tip the scales against a man who would stop at nothing to maintain his reign. But as I turned one last time to push through the crowd, a sudden silence fell, punctuated only by the chilling echo of glass shattering behind me. A moment later, darkness encroached as the lights flickered and then plunged us into shadows, and in the engulfing despair, I realized that in this game of life and death, every act of courage could have unforeseen consequences, and we were still dancing on the edge of a knife. I stumbled forward, the darkness swallowing the room in a way that felt almost suffocating. My heart raced as I squeezed Laura's hand tighter, the reassuring warmth fighting against the cold grip of panic that threatened to overtake me. With the lights flickering like dying stars, gasps and whispers enveloped us, a chaotic orchestra of confusion and fear. Through the thickening shadows, I could barely make out Harris Vale, a hulking silhouette against the dimming glow of gala lights. His voice cut through the tension like a knife, commanding and cold. "Everyone remains calm. This is merely a malfunction." Laura's breath caught in her throat, and I turned to her, desperation etched across her features. "What do we do?" she asked quietly, her eyes darting around, searching for an escape route. "Don't lose sight of me," I whispered, the urgency thick in my voice. "We need to find that man from earlier. He's our only chance." We inched forward, shadows crawling across the walls like restless spirits. My thoughts swirled with questions about the woman in white, about Harris, about the stranger whose familiarity gnawed at the edges of my memory. Each step felt precarious, like navigating a tightrope suspended over a void. Then, just as I felt a glimpse of hope in the distance, the lights flickered back on, bathing the room in an eerie glow. The panic surged anew as we faced a frightful scene, panicked guests clustering in groups, their faces painted with dread. And at the center, Harris stood firm, exuding an aura of authority mingled with menace. "Search the area." His voice thundered, a cruel command that sent chills rippling through the crowd. The air felt thick, charged with the electricity of an imminent storm, and I could sense the predator honing in on its prey. "Come on, we have to hide," I urged, pulling Laura towards a corridor off to the side. Our momentary refuge was cluttered with chairs and discarded decorations, remnants of laughter and joy now tangled in fear. It was a shadowed sanctuary amid the chaos, but for how long? As we edged deeper into the makeshift hideout, I felt an even deeper weight of decisions pressing down on me. "What if we find the man?" I asked, hoping my voice could convey the clarity I sought. "What if he can expose Harris' operations, his secrets?" Laura hesitated, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. "What if it's a trap? What if he leads us into a worse danger?" Her words struck me centered. I needed not only to find the man but to trust my instincts, our instincts. Suddenly, the memory of the woman in white came crashing back, her frantic warnings, the urgency in her words. "Find the truth before it finds you." Feeling a tug of instinct, I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. The light illuminated our cramped space, and I quickly opened an encrypted messaging app. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I needed to reach my network, my allies. But before I could type a single word, the echo of footsteps drew closer, our breathing halted, and I could feel Laura's grip tightening around my arm. A silhouette materialized at the entrance, shrouded in darkness. My heart raced as I strained to see, praying it was our answer rather than more trouble. To our relief, it was the man from earlier, the one who slipped through the crowd like smoke. His presence felt electrifying, and I half expected him to vanish into the shadows once more. But instead, he stepped closer, his expression guarded yet earnest. "They're looking for you," he whispered urgently, glancing back toward the corridor of the gala. "You have to leave now." "There's no time." "Wait," I breathed, breathless with a mix of excitement and dread. "What do you know about Harris? Why did you come to the gala?" "Because," he said, his voice low and steady, "you're not the only ones wanting to expose him. But you're in way over your heads." Laura's gaze, filled with uncertainty, shifted between the two of us. "We can't just run away. We need the truth." The man's eyes hardened, as if he could sense my determination. "The truth is a double-edged sword, and Harris has eyes everywhere." He took a step closer. "There's a server hidden in this building that holds everything you need. But if you want it, you'll have to find it and be prepared for what comes next." Before I could respond, the sound of harsh laughter echoed from outside our hiding place, sending a wave of dread through me. "Harris is gathering his associates," the man warned, his voice sharp. "You won't get out if you don't act now." "That I can't just leave," I protested, urgency battling with the desire for clarity. "What's the catch? You can't just drop cryptic messages and walk away." But as I turned, he was already stepping back into the shadows, his figure constricting until he disappeared, swallowed by the dark. The comforting warmth Laura had offered only moments before began to dissipate, replaced by an anxious chill. We were alone again, yet barrier had shifted, and the stakes had risen beyond my comprehension. "We can't sit here," I said, heart pounding against my ribs. "If we want the truth, we have to find that server, then we'll find it together." Laura's voice was firm, grounding amidst the turmoil of the night, but even as determination surged within me, a shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, a familiar figure slipping between the crowd outside, Harris's head of security. "I never imagined a single act of courage could disrupt a billionaire's reign of fear," I murmured, voice barely a whisper. The confrontation loomed closer, and the curtain of danger slowly rose, revealing a stage unlike any I had ever faced. And in that moment, the clarity crystallized around the unseen Costa. The truth was now intricately tied to survival, and we were poised on the verge of uncovering something darker than we had ever anticipated. As the echo of footsteps faded, the darkness enveloped us once more, pressing in like a suffocating fog. The shadows danced menacingly around us, mocking our vulnerability and isolation. I could feel the pounding of my heart reverberating in my ears, a steady reminder of our precarious situation. "Are you ready for this?" Laura's voice broke through the silence, her resolve tempered with concern. I nodded, steeling myself for what lay ahead, yet dread knotted in my stomach. Our journey through the maze of the gala had taken every ounce of courage we possessed, but now it felt as though the real test was just beginning. With cautious determination, we made our way towards the flickering lights ahead, searching for that elusive server and the truth it guarded. We stepped into the main hall, where chaos still reigned. Guests were milling about, their faces twisted in fear, whispering secrets to one another as they eyed the exits. Harris stood at the center, wielding his power like a weapon, barking orders to his men. It was both exhilarating and terrifying to think that a single confrontation could challenge his empire. "Look," I whispered, pointing to an ornate door at the far end. "That has to be it." My mind raced with possibilities, stored incriminating evidence, detailed accounts of his operations, countless betrayals laid bare. My pulse quickened, and a surge of pride washed over me. The potential for change pulsed like a heartbeat within my chest. Laura caught my eye, and for a brief moment, her uncertainty mirrored my own. But as our gazes locked, I saw something deeper, a shared understanding that our courage was interwoven. Whatever we found behind that door, we would face it together. With a steadying breath, we maneuvered through the crowd, heartbeats synchronizing as we approached the door. I glanced back, finding Harris' gaze deadlocked on us, his eyes flaring with a dangerous intensity. The realization sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. She knew we were onto him, and he wouldn't let us escape easily. Turning the handle, a faint click resonated as the door swung open, revealing a dimly lit storage room filled with dusty boxes and old electronics, a far cry from the vibrant gala overhead. The scent of stale air mixed with dampness wafted toward us, but we pressed in, desperate for answers. "Where?" I started, my voice tremulous. But before I could finish, an unexpected noise broke through the stillness, a whirring sound, almost like a computer booting up. "There it is," Laura breathed, moving toward the flickering glow of a monitor in the corner. "This has to be connected to the server," but our moment of exhilaration was abruptly shattered. A loud crash echoed from the hallway, and the footsteps we had heard before came rushing toward us, punctuated by strained voices calling out for compliance. The security team was closing in, "Quick!" I urged, racing toward the source of the sound. "If we can find it, we'll know everything." As I pulled open a file cabinet, adrenaline dulled my senses, and I began rummaging through pages dulled by time, documents, contracts, names of powerful associates intertwined with murky deals. But nothing I touched felt substantial enough to unsettle Harris Fortress. "Here," Laura shouted, her eyes wide, pointing toward a hidden panel in the wall. "It has to be this." We worked together, pushing the panel open, revealing a database filled with files, court cases, offshore accounts, and notes detailing each breach of trust. A sense of hope surged. We were on the brink of exposing this intricate web of lies. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the hulking figure of Harris, head of security, filled the doorway. "You thought you could escape?" he sneered, a predatory glint in his eye. Panic surged through us, and we both instinctively backed away, very aware that all the courage in the world felt fragile against the bulk of his presence. "Get ready to move," I whispered urgently. "Well, distract him," Laura said, her eyes steely with defiance. "Just get what you need." Before I could argue, she darted forward, an explosion of bravado, drawing the man's attention away from the panel. Time slowed as I snapped back to the screen, my fingers flying across the keyboard, a whirlwind of data flooding my senses. But just as I began downloading the files, a spine-chilling scream erupted from the hallway, a sound of sheer terror that caused the world around me to stand still. Laura's face paled, heaviness settling in my gut as the reality hit like a thunderbolt. "Laura!" I shouted, torn between the mission and the desperate need to protect her. I could hear her struggling, the faint sounds of scuffling echoing through the storage room. Torn, I glanced at the monitor. The files almost downloaded everything we needed, but the sound of her struggle split through the tension like glass shattering. "Help!" Her voice was raw, a plea that shattered my resolve. With every ounce of strength, I smashed my fist onto the keyboard, aborting the download in a heartbeat and racing toward the door. But as I crossed the threshold, I saw him. Harris Security was dragging her away, and her eyes met mine, fear and fury intertwining. And in that moment, under the glare of nefarious intent, I understood the true depth of our mission. It wasn't just about exposing his empire, it was about saving the people caught in its web, including the woman I had come to realize meant everything to me. As I advanced toward them, ready to fight back for her, a sudden flicker of movement behind me sparked my instincts. Another figure emerged, familiar but shrouded in uncertainty. "Stop!" came the voice, sharp, echoing. But it wasn't Harris. It was the woman in white. In the twist of fate that felt almost miraculous, the struggle at hand was quickly overshadowed by the revelation looming larger than life itself. My heart lurched as a wave of uncertainty washed over. What did this mean for us, and how deep did the conspiracy go? The stakes were no longer just about truth, they were about survival. And with every revelation that unfolded, it seemed the abyss we were standing at the edge of was deeper and darker than I had ever imagined. The tension in the air was palpable as the woman in white stepped forward, her presence commanding instant attention. Laura's struggle stopped momentarily, her uncertainty wavering as she glanced at me. The figure stood tall, cloaked in an aura that felt strangely both protective and threatening. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice laced with urgency as I positioned myself between Laura and the looming security guard. The tension electrified the space, elements of fear and confusion swirled like a dark storm cloud above us. "That I am here to help," the woman said, her tone steady, but her expression remained inscrutable. "You must trust me. The situation is more complicated than you realize, trust you?" I spat, glancing back at Harris Mann, who was still clenching Laura's arm tightly. "What are you enough?" she interrupted, raising her hand. "This isn't the right place to explain. They're coming for all of you." In that charged instant, I felt a sudden surge of vulnerability. Her words unraveled the tightly wound fabric of our mission. The realization hit me with an almost physical weight: we were in more danger than I had acknowledged. Laura's eyes shifted between us, her fierce defiance was slowly cracking under the strain of uncertainty. The security guard tensed, sensing the shift in focus, ready to pounce at any misstep. The woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There's no time. If they catch you, all of this your fight will be for nothing. We need to get out of here, now." Fear clawed at my throat as I weighed our choices, my heart racing with the gravity of the situation. "But Laura, go!" she cried out suddenly, her fierce spirit surging through her voice again. "Get the files and leave. I can handle this." Before I could respond, the woman grabbed my arm, pulling me further into the hidden recesses of the storage room. With one last choking glance at Laura, I felt my resolve begin to fracture at the seams. "Stay close," the woman urged, her grip firm yet calming. We raced deeper into the tangled maze of boxes and discarded equipment. Each step felt heavier as I imagined the very real threat looming behind us, every echo of footsteps bringing with it a darker realization of our situation. Each beat of my heart whispered that I had left Laura at the mercy of our enemies, sinking deeper into danger. "Listen," the woman said, her voice urgent yet devoid of panic as we skidded behind a stack of worn crates. "Harris has eyes everywhere. You have to understand, he's planned for this. You can't expose him without the right leverage." "Leverage?" I echoed, confusion wrestling with the fear that churned within me. "What do you mean?" She sighed heavily, as if the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. "His power isn't just rooted in money, it's his control over people, including those around you. You need something he values, something personal. There's a ledger, hidden in his office, that details every corrupt deal he's made. It's your only chance." "How do you know this?" I asked, a pang of distrust igniting within me. "I used to work for him," she confessed, her gaze finally meeting mine with an intensity that struck my core. "I escaped his grasp, but I know how he operates. I want to help you bring him down." Her admission hung between us, heavy with the unspoken consequences. "But how do I know you haven't come to lead me into a trap?" "I can't blame you for feeling that way," she said softly. "But you have to determine if I'm willing to risk everything for your fight. Right now, we need to prioritize getting you out of here alive." A gut instinct kicked in, urging me to trust her. In the chaos of our surroundings, something flickered in my mind, a flame of hope in the most unlikeliest of allies. Yet worry surged, overpowering that glimmer as it returned to Laura, still entangled in danger with that brute. With reluctant resolve, I nodded. "All right. But what about Laura?" "There's nothing you can do for her now," she said, her voice almost breaking. Panic coursed through my veins like wildfire. "You don't understand. She's brave, but she's not prepared for what he'll do to keep his empire standing." A tense silence surrounded us, amplifying the sound of our own breathing. Each heartbeat echoed with the duality of hope and despair as urgency sizzled in the air. "Trust me," the woman urged, her eyes softening. "Well, come back for her. But we need to move." We slipped out from behind the crates just as a flash of light illuminated the space from the hallway. Voices erupted, frantic shouts punctuating the tension, and I felt the heat of panic blooming in my chest. "Now," she hissed, guiding me down a narrow passage that veered to the left. I could still hear the distant echoes of Laura's voice, firm, unyielding, fighting against a tide of oppression. "Laura," I whispered, desperation lacing my tone. But the further we moved, the more silence cloaked the chaos behind us. As we climbed into the hidden reaches of the old service duct, I couldn't shake the gnawing feelings of impending loss and fear. The woman pressed onward with an urgency that bordered on reckless. "We're almost there, just a little further," she assured me. The air turned musty as we crawled, the path narrowed, squeezing the breath from my chest. Every inch felt like it was 1,000 miles away from the warmth of Laura's fierce spirit. I hesitated, battling the guilt that clawed at my heart. We emerged into a flickering emergency exit, a sharp light cutting through the dim shadows, and I felt a rush of fresh air breathe life into my weary limbs. Yet, a shudder coursed through every fiber of my being. What awaited us out there was nothing short of a reckoning, an unknown that could shatter everything we fought for. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, pulsing like a heartbeat. Against the growing storm in my gut, I pulled it out, my breath hitching at the message that glared at me from the screen. Get out now. He knows where you are. My pulse quickened as the woman beside me turned pale, her expression morphing into one of dread. He can't know. We have to. But before she could finish, another chilling sound echoed through the space, a door slamming behind us followed by the unmistakable rhythmic footfalls of approaching danger. I turned to her, fear lacing my words. What have you led me into? Questions hung thick and heavy, but there was no time to answer them. I felt the world shift beneath my feet, and with horror rising in my throat, I realized our only option was to run towards the uncertainty of a future that had never felt more precarious, and more importantly, run away from the impending doom threatening to swallow us whole. The urgency of our flight quickly overshadowed my earlier doubts. Each hurried step thudded against the cold concrete beneath us, echoing with the uncertainty that had suddenly consumed my thoughts. We burst through the emergency door and into the night, the air heavy with tension, but still carrying the faint scent of promise. Where do we go? I gasped, eyes darting in every direction, hyper-aware of the shadows that seemed to shift with malicious intent, towards the alley near the old warehouse. It's fewer eyes, and we can regroup there, the woman said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around us. I could sense her fear palpable and raw, intertwined with a fierce determination. I hesitated, glancing back at the flickering building light fading behind us, my mind haunted by images of Laura, brave, defiant Laura. Would she still be fighting? Would she break under the pressure or find a way to escape like the hero I knew her to be? Stay focused, the woman urged, snapping me back to the present. Her narrowing eyes matched the urgency of the moment. If we don't put distance between us and Harris's men, we'll be trapped. Nodding, I pushed aside my worries, channeling everything into our escape. The woman led the way, her movements assured. In the hushed night, I dared to hope. Maybe together, we could dismantle Harris' empire, maybe Laura would be safe, even if I had to leave her behind for now. As we navigated through the tangled streets, a sense of camaraderie began to bloom, forged in the adrenaline of our mutual survival. I turned to the woman, desperate to understand the mind working beside me. What's your name? Clara, she replied, her voice firm against the wind swirling between us. And what's yours? Emily. The name felt foreign on my lips in that moment, swallowed up by everything we were running from. Clara offered a slight nod before we slipped into the alley. It was dark, the faint glow of a distant street lamp casting spooky silhouettes against the brick walls. Suddenly, a flicker of hope illuminated my heart. We'd made it, at least for now. As we paused to catch our breath, the reality of my decision weighed heavily on me. Why are you helping me? What's in it for you? Clara turned to me, her expression resolute but tinged with something softer, vulnerability, perhaps. I've seen what Harris does to those who stand against him. I can't let that happen to you, or to anyone else. Her honesty hit me like a sprightly breeze, awakening the warmth of hope in my chest. But you left him. Why come back for me? Because I should have never left him without trying to right my wrongs. What he's doing, it's bigger than any one person. But you're the key. You have the courage to fight him where I failed. I need to help you succeed. Before I could respond, a sudden crash echoed in the stillness, breaking the fragile moment we shared. Fear surged through me. They're here, I hissed, adrenaline spiking as I peered around the corner to find shadowy figures moving further down the alley. Stay close, Clara instructed sharply, grabbing my arm to guide me deeper into the recesses of the alley. My breath became uneven, and a rush of anxiety nearly overwhelmed me once more at the thought of losing Laura, of rushing recklessly away from her just moments ago. That's when it happened, or rather, when it didn't. A sudden surge of warmth enveloped me, wrapping tightly around the fear clawing at my heart. It was Clara's hand, squeezing my own with a fierce intensity. It flickered between us, momentary and fragile, but ignited the courage I desperately needed. "Keep moving," she whispered, leading me down narrow paths and tighter corners, navigating the darkness like a seasoned warrior. We finally broke free onto an empty street illuminated by the pale glow of battered streetlights. Just as I began to feel a sense of relief, Clara paused, her eyes darkening with urgency. "We can't go any further up the road. Harris men are patrolling every corner. We need to find somewhere hidden, somewhere they won't think to look." I glanced at the faint outline of a diner across the street, its flickering neon sign catching my eye. "What about there?" Clara studied the establishment, then nodded. "We can blend in for a moment. Get inside, assess the situation." We crossed the street low and quiet, clambering through the door into the warm, inviting space. My heart sang for a brief second. Dull conversations and steaming cups of coffee grounded the surreal nature of our escape. The diner, however, was a mixed blessing. At one corner booth, a figure sat nursing their caffeine, unassuming man with a weary face. But something about him felt familiar, like a remnant of a childhood faintly lodged in my memory, surfacing amidst the chaos. "Just act natural," Clara urged, perhaps sensing my hesitation. Moments later, the door swung open behind us, and the world outside sharpened to a brutal edge as Harris men marched in, a pack of wolves encroaching on unsuspecting prey, their eyes scanning the room with a predatory gleam. My heart raced as the diner fell quiet, slow confessions drawing wary gazes toward the danger creeping in. They were here for me, for us. I felt Clara tense beside me, our fate now entwined in this fragile moment of inevitability. Would they recognize us? Would they come for us in the hushed night? The answer to those questions hung heavily as I fought against the cold weight of panic ready to envelop me once more. Then, the man across the booth shifted, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. There was something in that stare, something that felt like a tether to a forgotten truth, and in that split second, the realization blossomed within me, echoing ominously through my veins. Just how deep does Harris's reach extend? As the shadows ambushed the diner, a deep fear blossomed alongside a burning hope. I clutched Clara's hand tighter, already knowing I was standing on the edge of revelations that would change everything, because in that moment, he was my only path forward, an unexpected ally who could either save us or seal our doom. The atmosphere in the diner thickened, a mixture of fear and uncertainty hanging like heavy smoke as Harris's men filled the room. Every set of eyes gravitated toward them, measuring the tension that shimmered across the rickety floorboards. The sound of my heartbeat echoed in my ears, drowning out everything else: the clatter of cutlery, the soft chatter of patrons, the hiss of the coffee machine steaming in the open kitchen. Clara's grip on my hand tightened, as if she could draw strength from me just as I was drawing it from her. I finally tore my gaze away from the men's malevolent presence and looked back at the weary man in the booth. Something inside me flickered, a familiarity that felt deeply buried yet impossibly close. His gaze felt anchored, steadying me amid the chaos. "Emily," Clara whispered urgently, breaking my reverie. "We need to think." The diner's fluorescent lights danced above us, creating a buzz of ambience alongside the lingering scent of fried food. I forced my attention back to Clara, my mouth dry with the urgency buzzing between us. "I know him," I managed, nodding towards the man. "Somehow, I know him." Clara's brow furrowed. "Focus. He may not be your ally. People often change when threatened by Harris. If the universe sought to intervene." A glass shattered behind the counter, a waitress yelping in surprise. All eyes turned toward the noise, and in that split-second distraction, Clara leaned in closer, her voice a mere whisper. "Stay low, and if we have to make a move, be ready." Each second felt suspended in time. The men in suits surveyed the diner with invasive scrutiny, confidence dripping from their every step. They were predators, primal instincts honed through shadows, while we were mere prey, This was a dance of survival, and each beat echoed with the risk of our capture, but I couldn't shake the pull towards the familiar man. He had a past entwined with my own, maybe even a thread connecting our stories. I risked a glance back at him, my heart pounding wildly, and met his gaze once more. Then he nodded ever so slightly, as if encouraging me to trust him. A flicker of recognition ignited something deep within me, stirring memories I couldn't quite grasp. "Stay calm," Clara urged again, her grip unwavering. I shifted slightly to place my back completely against the booth, trying to merge into the shadows. The crackling tension grew heavier as Harris's men moved deeper into the diner. One of them, a tall figure with a jagged scar running along the edge of his jaw, scanned our corner with a predatory gaze, his lips curling in a smile that sent icy chills down my spine. "Hey, you!" he barked suddenly, causing panicked breaths around the room. My heart raced as Clara's body tensed beside me. No longer a mere bystander, my instincts kicked in. "Ignore them," I murmured to Clara, knowing we had to blend in, to pretend we were just two diners savoring our meals. But that became increasingly impossible as the man continued barking orders, directing his comrades toward the counter and shining spotlights into the faces of surprised patrons. My mind raced, weighing options that felt dangerously thin. Meanwhile, instinctively, I felt the weight of a pen in my pocket, the only tangible reminder that I existed outside of Harris's reach. It seemed ridiculous, but somehow it reminded me to stay resolute. The man across the booth shifted again, leaning forward into the illuminated space of the diner. "Don't panic," he murmured, his voice somehow gentle amidst the storm. "I know how this ends." The phrase struck me with an electric charge. It was faint, but undeniably reassuring. The way he spoke felt like an anchor, and I was desperate to understand. How do you know?" "I'm someone who has fought against Harris." "I know who you are, Emily," he revealed, the intensity in his eyes unwavering. My breath caught, and Clara's grip faltered just slightly. "You know me?" I whispered, shaken. "We don't have time for this," Clara interjected, but the man held up a hand, a protective gesture. "I know about Laura," he said, the name reverberating through the fog. That clouded my mind. "And I'm here to help. But you have to trust me." A tumult of emotions flooded through me, love for Laura blending with deep-rooted fear for her safety. My pulse hammered faster, as his words painted a more complicated picture. Laura was within reach, and so was the key to dismantling everything Harris had built. Before I could formulate a response, the scarred man broke through the atmosphere, barking orders, his patience unraveling like a frayed thread. "Stop hiding. We know you're here somewhere," he sneered. In that moment of rising panic, the man's expression sharpened, signaling urgency. "Listen carefully. I need you to follow me when I say now. Focus on Clara. You can trust her more than anyone." As the wolf pack drew closer, Clara took a deep breath, and something inside her ignited a newfound resolve and strength that spurred me onward. I gripped her hand tighter, ready to move. "Now!" The man's voice cut through the din, piercing through the suffocating tension. Simultaneously, Clara and I bolted from the booth, following his lead through the narrow gap behind the counter. Adrenaline electrified my movements, every muscle alive with fear and determination. The world outside was dark, but the diner shrank behind use, an imposing shadow weighed down by uncertain alliances and lurking danger. Everything shifted into slow motion as we raced into the night, our breaths ragged and hurried, but just as relief began to wash over me, a sudden scream pierced through the air, striking like a lightning bolt. From the front of the diner, the voice cried out, the same voice I had fought to protect. "Emily! No! Don't leave me!" In that instant, the realization struck me with gut-wrenching clarity. Laura wasn't just in danger, she was right there, by the entrance, caught in a collision of shadows, the ghost of whom I thought I'd abandoned. And as her terrified eyes locked onto mine, the world spiraled a dizzying haze of choices, connections, and desperate hope. I was torn between the looming threat from the past and the easily observable future of what saving her would require. Clara tugged at my arm, but I hesitated. In that moment, I had to protect Laura. With Harris and his men hot on our heels, I knew I faced a harrowing decision that could redefine everything we'd fought for, Emily. Laura shouted again, her voice a lifeline amidst the chaos, one more desperate plea followed by panic that shattered everything I had tried to forge. Time fractured around me, the burden of courage weighing heavy as I stood at the crossroads, the spark of danger pinching at my heels, and the voice of truth echoing in my heart. Stay or go? I murmured, the question crackling in the raw air like a heart forged by fire. The shadows loomed over us, and in that critical moment, the future lurched precariously toward uncertainty. The sirens of danger were unrelenting, wailing in the background like the ghosts of choices I hadn't yet made. Everything blurred, but Laura's face remained sharply in focus, her wide eyes pleading for salvation and understanding. I wasn't just fighting for her life, I was wrestling with my own demon's fear, the implications of loyalty, and a desperate longing to belong. Emily. Please. She cried, her voice breaking through the swirling chaos around us. The pull of her fear felt like a noose tightening around my chest. But Clara was beside me, her grip strong and steady, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. We need to move, now. She urged, urgency threading through every syllable, yet, as her plea recoiled against my heart, I could feel the weight of possibility pressing down on me. The man from the booth hadn't left my thoughts. His eyes had told stories of sacrifice and bravery, but this was different. This wasn't about destiny, it was about the choice that lay before me. For a flickering second, I imagined leaping toward Laura, taking her hand, and running through the danger, choosing sisterhood over fear. But each step I hesitated to take felt laden with betrayal. Hadn't I already abandoned her once, enveloped in my own shadows, and as if the universe sought to illuminate my conflict, the diner door burst open wider, and Harris's men surged into the night, their presence consuming and unrelenting. They were relentless shadows, prowling with purpose, and I wouldn't let them claim me again. Emily, we can't. Clara's voice echoed behind me, a tether pulling me back from the front lines. They'll capture you both, but with every passing heartbeat, determination flared brighter than fear. I felt the echo of my own name called out in exigence, a single thread of fate tying my past and present together. I could be there for her, I wanted to be. Go. I commanded Clara, my voice a low whisper, infused with defiance and fire. I have to save her. The wildness in Clara's gaze spoke volumes, her emotions laid bare, understanding mingled with sorrow. You'll be walking into a trap. With raw resolve, I turned back toward the open door, silently questioning myself even as the shadows loomed. The scarred man's warning echoed through my mind. This wasn't just a choice of courage, it was a gamble that could cost everything. Just as I broke into a sprint toward Laura, my heart leaped unexpectedly when a figure appeared next to her, the man from the booth. He surged forward, the spotlight of resolve illuminating him as he reached for Laura, stepping protectively in front of her. Stay behind me, both of you. He shouted, narrowing his focus on the approaching threat. The adrenaline coursing through me morphed into clarity, confirmations blossoming in my chest. Was here for both of us, ready to challenge the darkness. Panic surged anew in my veins, but there was also hope. Harris hadn't just unleashed chaos, he had opened doors I never thought I could walk through. The door to strength found in numbers. Laura, trust him. I cried, urgency lighting a fire in my chest. We need to work together. She looked from me to the man, comprehension dawning amidst her fear. Which side are you on? Laura managed, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. I'm here to end this, he replied, his gaze unwavering. It felt like unity forged in the flames, strange and beautifully broken, yet powerful enough to confront the approaching storm. A thunderous crash echoed behind us as Clara made a tactical retreat, but I knew she wouldn't leave without Methy. We're family. We were family. Let's go. The man urged, but before we could even move, Harris' men, led by their daunting leader, emerged from the shadows. Look what we have here, the scarred man taunted, his sneer a dagger driven deep into our hearts. How to chinga pity it'll all end in tears. Laura flinched at his words, and something inside me shattered. I couldn't allow that monster to taunt her. It's time to end this. I shouted defiantly, adrenaline surging. It was time to reclaim what was stolen. With instincts sharper than ever, I took a step toward them, prepared to confront the darkness head-on. You'll never win. Not with us fighting back. Surprisingly, the man beside me nodded, igniting a determination that flickered inside me. Together, we're stronger than you could ever know, he replied with a fierce intensity. But as Harris' men closed in, and time stretched taut against the pressure of our colliding hopes and fears, a bombshell dropped into the fray. You think you can escape us? The scarred man sneered, revealing a flashing piece of paper clasped tightly in his hand. We've got something you'll never take back. In that split second, I found clarity buried within the chaos. There were secrets deeper than fear's grasp, and the future was at stake. What do you mean? I shouted, the tremor in my voice betraying the chill crawling down my spine. Laura, it's about you, he hissed, a mocking glint in his eye. Everything you think you know, it's all a lie. As the words hung in the air, the world around me shifted, and I felt a harsh knot in my gut, chaining fear to reality. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a battle for the truth, and the truth was looming ever nearer, a truth that threatened the very foundation of our lives. And as the impending clash erupted, I realized that the very act of courage I had envisioned had transformed into something far more complex, an intricate web of love, betrayal, and sacrifice, set to unravel before my very eyes. The sirens of danger swirled around us, mixing with the tension that hung thick in the air. As the scarred man's taunt echoed, I felt the unstable ground of my reality teetering beneath me. Laura was the key, but the layers of her existence were about to be peeled back, revealing truths that could redefine everything we fought for. Laura, don't listen to him. I shouted, my voice fighting against the onslaught of fear that twisted within me. She looked between me and the scarred man, her brow furrowed with confusion and fear. What do you mean? She managed, her voice trembling. A smirk crept across the scarred man's lips, darkness swirling in his eyes. You really don't know, do you? Your whole life has been a fabricated illusion under Harris' control. You were chosen for a Riasona pawn in a game bigger than you can fathom. I could see the weight of his words bearing down on Laura. Uncertainty flickered behind her eyes like candlelight, threatening to extinguish her spirit. The very thought of her life being manipulated without her knowledge crushed my heart. I took a step closer to her, grounding my presence in the mounting chaos. Don't you dare let him get into your head. You are more than whatever sick game he's playing. Her gaze flickered to mine, reigniting that fierce spirit I had admired for so long. I've had enough of being someone's pawn, she declared, defiance rekindling in her voice. The scarred man laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the alley. Oh, but you've already been moved on the board. If you only knew how deep the truth goes, you'd realize your resistance is futile. In that moment, something shifted in me. I felt the surge of rage swell, an ember igniting within my chest. I refuse to let this monster dictate our fate. You don't get to control her, I shouted, stepping forward with renewed strength. Not now, not ever. Just then, the man from the booth sprang into action, positioning himself protectively at our side. His presence felt like a shield against the darkness. We can't back down, he urged, his voice steady. This isn't just about survival anymore, it's about reclaiming the truth and the lives that Harris has stolen. As the tension reached its tipping point, I saw movement flicker at the edge of my awareness. Clara peered around the corner, her eyes widened with urgency. Emily! We need to regroup, get out. All of you! The scarred man shouted, and without hesitation, chaos erupted. The diner's quiet intimacy morphed into a battleground. My heart raced as the men lunged forward, but with a determined scream, I pushed past all fear. Together! I shouted, raising our collective strength like a battle cry. In that frenetic moment, I clutched Laura's hand tightly, the warmth coursing through us reminding me of our bond, unbroken despite the encroaching darkness. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore, we're fighting for all of them. I yelled, Glancing behind us at the frightened faces of the diners clinging to hope, the man next to met his mysterious ally stood firm, embodying resolve. This is bigger than us. We've all been touched by Harris Reach. Now we rise. I turned back to Laura, her face alight with determination, fire burning in her eyes. Let's end this, she declared, her fierce spirit illuminating the abyss around us, and that's when everything changed. The words leaped from my lips like a lifeline, a kindred bond tethering us in a moment carved from time. Together, we exposed the truth. The scarred man's eyes narrowed, he wouldn't yield without a fight. But we were prepared to stand firm, hearts united. With a surge of adrenaline, we charged forward, an unstoppable force fueled by our collective anger and desire to reclaim our lives. Get the ledger, I shouted to the man, knowing the key to dismantling Harris' empire was only a door away. Our steps thundered in rhythm, igniting a ray of hope that pushed away the shadows that had plagued us for too long. As we barreled through the chaos, I felt the weight of our courageous choice pressing against vulnerability, revealing a path forged by resilience. The truth loomed ahead, a beacon guiding us back to the light. Together, we would tear down the walls that held us captive, unmasking Harris' lies. Together, we would free not just ourselves but everyone entangled in his web of deception. And as we ran toward the future, my heart soared. In the heart of darkness, I finally understood, courage wasn't the absence of fear but the resolute choice to fight for those we loved. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear: we were doing this for all of us, and it would be worth every sacrifice. The door loomed before us, and my fingertips brushed against the handle, a life-altering moment suspended in time. Well, reveal his secrets. We will shine a light on his darkness, I declared, as we stepped through the threshold together, bound by truth and an unbreakable spirit. With our breaths synchronized in anticipation, we crossed the threshold into a brighter tomorrow. The dawn would soon break, and when it did, the world would see Harris Vale for who he truly was, and we would emerge not as shadows but as warriors of unwavering hope. And as we pressed forward, I could feel in every beat of my heart that our fight was only just beginning.